1. I've been told I should make a big post of all my paranormal experiences from the house I used to live in. In the 9 or 10 years I lived there, so much stuff happened. I thought I'd share the most memorable. First, the voice. I was a kid, probably 7 or 8. I was 6, so I decided to sleep with my mom in our guest room on the pull-out bed. To get to our guest room, you had to walk through our bonus room. We had the door open to the bonus room that night, since the room would get stuffy. So that night, my mom and I were in our beds, trying to sleep. I remember it was pretty late and my dad was fast asleep, and all the TVs and stuff were turned off. Anyway, I was just drifting off to sleep when I heard the unmistakable voice of a little girl. It was super clear. It sounded like it came right from the doorway. I was turned away from the doorway, so I didn't see anything. I remember I tried to convince myself it was my imagination. Even though the voice was clear as day, the voice said, "Mama?" And then my mom asked me, "Glasses McDorkface, did you just say mama?" And then I said no and basically nubbed out and refused to turn to face the door. It couldn't have been someone outside, because we lived in the hills and the sound would have echoed. Plus all the windows were closed and we were on the 2nd floor. Also, I'm an only child. Next, moving toys. There were several occasions that I'd find my toys in random places. Like I'd come home and find a stuffed animal that was at the bottom of a box would be neatly down in the middle of my room on the floor. This time I'm talking about specifically happened when I was about 6. There was a night like many others where I couldn't sleep. Childhood insomnia life. I walked out of my room and down the hall to the top of the stairs and called down to my mom, who was watching TV downstairs with my dad. I went downstairs for like 2 minutes to ask if she could come up and lie down with me. I went back upstairs, and a toy I hadn't seen for years was in the middle of the hallway, like carefully placed down. And this happened while I was gone for only a few minutes. Next, the talking crystal ball toy. I had this Alice in Wonderland plastic crystal ball toy that would talk when you pressed a button. You were supposed to ask it a yes or no question, and it would answer with stuff like, "Duh," and "Absolutely," and "No," in Alice's voice, stuff like that. So one night, probably about the age of 10 or 11, I was trying to sleep when the toy turned on. It sounded like the battery was low or something, since the volume was now super low and really slow, almost demonic sounding. So I got up and made sure it was turned off, which it was. Then, the second I lie down again, it lights up and says something. So now I'm like, okay, what? And it keeps lighting up and saying stuff. So I took the damn batteries out and it was just making weird noises. And then I said, fuck this, and I threw it in the trash outside. Luckily, it didn't somehow get back into my room like in the movies. Now, the moving tissue box. This happened when I was 14 or 15. I was getting ready for bed one night and was getting ready to put my eye drops in, as I did every night. I had the tissue box next to me on the nightstand. Anyway, I put the drops in, which takes about 5 to 10 seconds, then I reach for a tissue, but my hand just hits the table. I wiped my eyes with my hands, thinking I had just knocked it on the floor. It wasn't on the floor. I was thinking, okay, how the fuck does a tissue box just disappear? It was right next to me. And then I scanned my bedroom, and it's on the other side, on top of my dresser. By now I had been used to this happening all the time, and at this point, we had sold our house and were moving in a few weeks. So I laughed and said out loud, "Ha! Very funny." Then there was a time a heavy object slid and fell off the table. It was family game night and I was probably 7. We were playing a board game in our bonus room when it happened. I don't know why, but I turned around and faced the windows, where we had a table with a bunch of stuff on it. One thing was an art project I made in kindergarten, which was pretty heavy and unlikely to tip over. So I turned around, and the second I did, the art project slid off the table and landed on the carpet with such force that it literally bounced when it hit the floor. My parents saw it too. I guess they turned around to see what I was looking at. And we just stared at it like, okay, what? And then I just started freaking out, and my parents tried to convince me it was just the wind. even though the windows were only cracked and there was no breeze outside. Pretty sure they both knew it wasn't the wind for a fact. Then small things like appliances turning on by themselves. There were a few times that our ceiling fans would turn on by themselves to the highest speed, or our lights would turn off and on. Also, there were so many times when I was home alone and would hear footsteps upstairs. And a couple times I even felt someone touch my back. When we finally sold that house, there was a day my friend was over. Her mom is a medium or something, and she said she always sensed the spirit of a young girl 4 or 5 years old, but didn't tell us because she didn't want to freak us out. Honestly, it makes sense with the toys and the voice. Seems like she was just trying to play with us, poor girl. I wonder what happened. Anyway, those are the most memorable experiences in that house that I had. 2. So the story happened when I was something like 12 years old. I lived in the south of France in a poor and multicultural neighborhood, quite calm. It was very early in the morning and I was walking in the garden. I was lucky to have a garden already, and it was surrounded by a small wall about 1 meter, topped with a wire mesh of about 1 meter also, to which bamboo pieces were attached to block the view. Obviously it didn't really block the view, not totally, it just prevented full transparency. My garden was at the corner between 2 streets and was in front of my house. You had to go inside to enter the house, not the other way around. So I was picking up something from the ground, and I had a very strange feeling, or rather a hint. I remember having had time to clearly guess that it was going to happen. A woman in black appeared on the street, on the sidewalk, at one end of my garden, and I swear when I saw her coming, she was staring at me already. Because of the bamboo and the wire mesh, it was not very easy to see what she looked like. But she was white in skin, had very exaggerated signs of aging. I was not at all easily frightened, but there, I simply froze for some reason, and contented myself with just watching her. She continued walking along my wall without looking away from me through the bamboo. There was also a moment when I lost sight of her because of a shed that stands between us. I swear that she stared at me when she passed behind that shed too. And that she stared at me from the moment she came out, in fact, even before, since she just didn't move her head. As soon as she passed behind the wall of the house itself and not that of the garden, I waited 10 good seconds without moving, and I ran to climb on the low wall, the last portion where I saw the woman. I leaned against the wire mesh, trying to observe her in the alley behind my house, a fairly long lane which does not cross other streets for a while. Maybe she lived behind, but when I looked, she was absolutely no longer there. You should know that my parents worked a lot, and I was often alone at home. It was not a problem, and I had been used to it since quite young, but fucked up stuff has happened in this house many times. 3. I'm not new to the paranormal. I was born with the gift, or curse per se, but this is the first time I have legitimately not known what to do or what this thing is, and I'm very worried. A bit of backstory. This is my aunt's family house. I visit about twice a week to babysit my cousins. They bought the house about 2 years ago. They have always had things following them. The other house they previously lived in was literal hell. This new house was normal, nothing weird. Trust me, I would have noticed if there was on first entering. Nothing. For a few months. My oldest cousin Alex, 11, went to visit my grandparents that same year and got very sick all of a sudden. She almost died within a week because of a bacterial infection. When they came back, she was still very weak, which seemed normal, but she started getting depressed more and more as the days went by, and we were all worried, of course. It was to the point she was almost suicidal. Now, I can read tarot. I see the cards and see messages. It's hard to explain. I don't see it with my physical eyes, but I digress. I asked about her, and the main message was that something had attached itself to her, and was very specifically attached to a bracelet she received while she was visiting my grandparents. A bracelet I didn't know about because she hadn't shown me. Anyway, I told my aunt, she gave it to me, I did what I was told. I got the bracelet, soaked it in salt water, said a prayer, cut it in half, and threw it away. It worked. The day after, she was back to normal. However, it didn't leave. It simply removed the attachment from her. It did not leave the house. That sucker stayed roaming. This is where it gets weird and what confuses me the most. The first one to see it was my aunt. It had taken Alex's appearance, and she saw it looking at Alex sleeping. My aunt used to sleep with her because she was scared. It disappeared after she first saw it. Fast forward a few weeks. My uncle saw what he thought was Alex enter the main bedroom and bathroom, walking behind my aunt while she got ready for work. He asked my aunt why Alex was up so early. It was bloody 5 a.m. But when they went into Alex's room, she was there sleeping. The rooms aren't connected. There's no way she had gone back without him seeing her. Again, about a month later, my mom was talking to my grandparents through video call, and my great-grandmother asked why I was looking at her from behind my mom's shoulder. It wasn't me. I wasn't even in the room. Throughout the months, it has taken my cousin's form, my uncle's, and my own. I have seen it in other forms as well, because it seems that because of said gift, I saw what it looked like in its true form. It looked like a very pale woman, or man, I can't even tell, with white hair. It looked disheveled, old, weird teeth, and very, very angry. Specifically at me, because I've been protecting the girls, and initially tried to get rid of it. It has gotten weaker because we make sure to protect ourselves, especially before bed. I gave my aunt clear instructions. All I get from this thing is desperation, just going, hungry, hungry, hungry. The Wi-Fi has gone down randomly when it never does that. Electronics are dying, the battery's drained. I'm not letting it feed, whatever the hell it is. It is definitely not a human, and it probably never was. The last message I got is that the other spirits in that house are holding it back. The ones from the land who seem to be Native American, for what I have seen, and other late relatives. The protection we do, all it can do is make it slightly weaker, but it won't leave no matter what I do. I don't know what to do. I'm very worried about the girls. Alex's sister is 3 years old, and I feel I can't protect them well. Does anyone know what the hell that thing is? How do I get rid of it? If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. 4. We'll call my best friend Artemis for privacy purposes. Well, Artemis and I live on the edge of our town in Wisconsin, in this little cul-de-sac surrounded by woods. So it's not uncommon to see wild animals such as turkeys, deer, foxes, and especially coyotes. Last year, when she first spotted the coyote, that seemed too big to be a coyote, she said she didn't think much about it, and assumed some old lady thought it was a dog and was just feeding it. Well, towards the end of winter this year, she saw it again. This time, similar to the last, she noticed that something was off about this random coyote, and pegged it off as the large one she saw during summer last year. So, a bit of context about Artemis. She has a 2-year-old and is a smoker, so she often goes outside to smoke. Most times she's alone. About a week or so ago, she was outside, smoking, while her mom watched her toddler. When she heard this clicking sound similar to how one would summon a cat or dog, well, her toddler just learned how to make that sound, and had been making it frequently. So her initial thought was that it was her daughter, but there was something really wrong with how it sounded. It didn't sound like her daughter. She said it almost sounded like someone was trying to mimic her daughter, but couldn't do it right. Artemis opened the front door to see if it was actually her kid, but when she looked in, her daughter was quietly watching TV. She closed the door, still looking in, and heard the sound again, but her daughter hadn't moved from the position she was in. She looked towards the roof of her house, and saw this weird fleshy thing that didn't look like anything or any animal she's ever seen. It looked at her, and then jumped the tree next to her house. This is when, she said, the panic really hit her. Recently, we'd had a bad storm that damaged that particular tree that the thing jumped on, so the tree had no branches and was very unstable. Even a bird would make it sway if it landed on the tree. So when she didn't see it sway or hear a thud, she got scared. She ran over to the tree and saw nothing, not even a shadow. She looked towards the tree line and didn't see anything, but felt very uneasy. Since that incident, every time she goes outside alone at night, she feels eyes on her and an overall sense of unease. On a few occasions, she'll hear bone-snapping crunches, similar to twigs snapping, but louder and nastier, as well as growling. But A said everything about it just seemed off and totally wrong. Keep in mind, this only happens when she's outside alone. Whatever it is, it's only targeting her. She also mentioned that sometimes when she flashes a light towards the tree line, instead of the usual yellow eyes that shine back, they are white. Artemis asked me to include that part, but she said she might just be paranoid, as she is now terrified to be outside alone at night. What do you guys think? Could it be a skinwalker or something else? Any advice for her? 5. The first time it happened, I was staying at my stepmom's house, and felt terrified while trying to sleep for no reason. I was laying next to my older sister, we were probably around 8 and 11 at the time, and got this feeling that I needed to leave immediately, but I was too scared to move. Then the whispering started. I can't really describe what it was, but it definitely sounded like someone was breathing near my ear, and was whispering aggressively, as if they were directly over my head. I don't even know if they were saying anything because it just sounded like gibberish. Talking about it now and remembering when it first happened is giving me goosebumps. I've always slept with a blanket tightly tucked over my ears ever since. I'm 23 now. We used to live about 30 minutes away from Atchison, Kansas. My uncle was super into paranormal things, and he would always take me and my sister with him when he wanted to drive to check out a place he'd been reading about. We frequently visited the Sally House, Molly's Hollow, the Gargoyle Mansion, and so many more places every month. I think back now and then and wonder if maybe we pissed something off that attached itself to me. My stepmom and dad ended up splitting up, and my dad ended up going to prison. My mom wasn't in the picture either, also in prison, and my stepmom didn't want us with her, so my sister and I ended up flying out west to live with my grandmother. The very first night there, even though we were thousands of miles away, the whispering got worse. I would hear it on and off throughout the night, and almost every night for a week. Then the visuals started. Shadows would appear in the corners of our room, and the feeling of absolute dread would wash over me. I got so terrified one night after waking up to feeling like I was being suffocated that I ran into my grandmother's room crying, asking her to let me sleep with her that night. For the rest of the night, while I laid next to my grandmother, I watched her closet and bathroom doors slowly open, and saw what I swear was a hunched-over shadow walking in circles in between them. After that night, I stopped hearing whispering and seeing anything, but the occasional feeling of dread spiked up out of nowhere. Still, I had to force myself not to turn around for whatever reason. It went on for over a decade until I heard or saw anything again. In 2018, my dad was shot and killed. My sister and I flew back to Missouri for the funeral, and for the first time in over a decade, I heard the whispers again. They started the very first night we touched down. We stayed for a week to visit with family and to attend the funeral. My uncle took us out to Atchison for old time's sake, he had said, and we went to all the same places we used to visit when we were younger, but the places no longer held that sense of wonder for me. Standing in the middle of Jackson Park, I felt fear. Standing on the porch of the Sally House, I felt dread. As we got in the car to drive away for the last time, I looked out the back window to stare at the Sally House, and saw what appeared to be a girl standing in the dead center of the road, staring back at the car. I have never felt so terrified in my entire life than I did at that moment. Every nerve in my body had screamed at me to look away, so I did as fast as I could. I almost peed myself when I heard what sounded like an almost whispered half-laugh. Every other night now I hear whispering. I see shadows in the corner of my house. I get terrible feelings of absolute dread and horror in certain areas, especially when I'm alone at night. My fiancé works all day and I work from home currently, so I am in the house alone most days. Before I could shove it down and ignore it, But now it happens during the day too. I don't know what it is. I've spoken with everyone from psychiatrists to priests. I've talked to my fiancé and my friends about it. I try to ignore it now. My friend is coming over this weekend to help sage my house. I'm hoping whatever it is will go away again. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 194. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. I swear the chills when I do these stories are getting worse. Creep up on me. Oh, just a word about the story with Artemis. In case you hadn't guessed, that wasn't the lady's actual name. What I've taken to doing whenever there's letters in a story, I think that works better written down. So I'm going to try it, see how it goes for a little while. Give the people names, but I'm going to give them names that clearly aren't theirs, because I think when people use letters, it's usually the person's first initial. So I don't want to accidentally use the real name. So in place of that, I'll be probably taking names from mythology and the like. So you might find there's a retail story where Zeus is trying to buy nachos. You never know. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.